that are doing that stuff. So
they're cutting in the mid range,
Yeah. So I really focus on making sure that that range is cleared up for the bass. The same with the whirly. Like, like I'll leave a little bit of guts in the whirly because it can sound horrible and thin to not do that. But just try to control it a little bit more. Yeah. I've been doing some more like side chaining stuff. Like with multiband compressors and stuff, like the Pro MB, the Fab Filter Pro MB is pretty cool because you can use it as a sidechain compressor, and then just control which frequencies you want to work on, and just even like a dB or two dip, like it can be really really useful. So like sometimes this doesn't always work, but like sometimes if the kick bass relationship is like almost right, but I just want a little more kick, instead of turning it up, what I'll do is I'll toss that Pro MB on there and sidechain the kick and the bass and just make it automate those, like the kind of 100 and below range, just to kind of let the kick sing a little bit more. And you can do other things too, like like putting the multiband on like a whirly and then using the bass guitar to kind of automate the whirly low frequencies to go down. Yeah. That can kind of be helpful. And you can do it really subtly too. Like it's not going to always make stuff sound unnatural. It just gives things a little bit more space sometimes.
Yeah. It sounds like you're constantly building a puzzle and you're always like conscious of, which frequency is going to interfere with which instrument when. And Well, the thing is like you can't, like, mixing isn't about like sound. It's about like the relationships of all the sounds together. Exactly.
Yeah. Like in that, I early on, like way before I was doing Scary Pockets or whatever, I had the privilege to like attend a mastering session, and it was at Lursen Mastering, and this dude Ruben Cohen, who's like a younger guy, was mastering this project I'd worked on. And what he was doing is he was flipping back and forth between reference tracks and the track he was working on. And that was really eye-opening to me because he wasn't listening to those songs. He was listening to like the overall like frequency of everything. Like how like what's happening here? Like, am I sort of in the ballpark? Do I like what's going on compared to these other reference things? And like, that's really helpful, like on a big picture level, but like as mixers, that's our responsibility as well. I know. Like the big picture and the small picture all at once. You know, the trees and the forest. It's super important. Yeah. Nice. Well, I guess let's segue into mastering, because I know you master a lot of the things you mix, which is something that I'm terrified of. No, seriously, because I by the end of a mix, I have zero objectivity anymore. So, if the artist tells me to master something, I'll probably wait a day. And I probably do as little as possible. Sure. Other than like what does mastering look like for you, and how are you able to do that on mixes that you've mixed? Okay, so I was talking. This has been a journey for me. Like I definitely, I'm super comfortable with it now, but that's after doing like a couple hundred songs that way, so it doesn't really like freak me out in the same way. But I kind of have like a big part of the sound of my mixes is like the master bus, like just in the first place. I don't love the sound of just straight like digital recordings. Like it just builds up on itself, and there's something that happens on like some older like analog recordings. There's this sort of glue that is just, I haven't figured out a way to sort of emulate that glue without using mix bus stuff. If there was a way that I'd figured out, I would do that, because like doing a lot of mix bus processing comes with its own set of problems. Like stems are a pain in the butt, there's lots of stuff, but like it works for me, and like it seems like clients are happy and people like the sound. So I've sort of built like a plug-in chain that I just use on my mix bus, like whether or not I am like mastering it myself or not. And a lot of the times it's the same plugins. I realized that because I'm mixing and I'm mastering, like if I always ask an artist before I start, like what, like I know ahead of time whether I'm going to be mixing or mixing and mastering. So I don't really like differentiate the process a bunch. But what I normally try to do is I get the mix to a spot where I like all the sounds and I think everything's like rocking pretty good, and I've made some arrangement decisions, and like all that stuff is working okay. And then, and a lot of times there's just like, oh, there's something missing. And that's when I start turning on my like compressors and stuff on the bus. And like, I can tell you what the chain is that I'm using now. If you
sure.
want, sure. So I've got,
why not?
Yeah, sure. Like a lot of it's kind of based off of like the last thing that I heard that Chad Blake was using, because I think that his mixes sound ridiculous, and I love them and would love to mix stuff that sounded that good.
You're not alone, right?
Oh yeah, he's the best, man. But yeah, so I've got the Kush Clariphonic EQ.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I don't have it, but yeah.
So that's sitting at the top. And I normally have that set to like silk, and it's not always on. It's just there if I need it. Like, but then I use the Studer A800, which does some cool stuff in the low end and really adds some like nice bigness and glue and stuff. Normally I have it on like the cleanest like possible setting I can get it. Like, so I'm also not hitting it very hard. It just does this like light saturation thing that's nice. So I'll either be on like 30 IPS or 15 IPS. The Clariphonic is really there if I'm using it on 15 IPS, just to kind of bring back a little bit of the top stuff.
Got it.
It's just a nice pairing. And I like, really, with the Clariphonic, it's like maybe like a half of like one of the little lines or whatever. Then after that, I've got a EQ. It's called Overtone. And it's made, I don't remember who it's made by, but it's just a nice, clean EQ that like works really well, and it's hard to make it sound harsh. It's just a good like sort of master bus EQ. And then I've got the like Slate's gray compressor. It's kind of their version of SSL. And that doesn't always get used. Sometimes it does. And if I'm using that, like I'll just kind of tap it. Like it's just doing a little bit. It's just kind of like what everybody does with an SSL style compressor. Like it's nothing special going on there. But then I use the PSP Vintage Warmer, and that's kind of where a lot of the magic starts happening, which it's really kind of it's a different sort of compressor, because it does like upward compression as well. As like limiting, so it'll kind of raise the low stuff. And so that's the reality is people like music loud, and it's really easy to get your transients up to 0. What's hard is getting all of your sustainy stuff up to a spot where your average level is at the right spot. And the PSP has been really helpful for me with that. I use that one, I tweak a lot, and so it's probably not useful to talk about like settings. A lot of the time it's in multiband. I don't use there's like a fat thing on there that adds some saturation. And I used to use it all the time, and then I turned it off one time, was like, oh, this is better. Like I don't like it in this context. And then after that, it can be a couple different things, but then it's Oxford Inflator, which is just classic. I normally have it on like 25%, but I do a lot of my like makeup gain like there. And then the Fab Filter Limiter, which, all of this stuff in the chain, it's really the cumulative thing. Like any one thing isn't doing a ton, but the difference between like none of it on and all of it on is massive. And really helps shape stuff. And so what I do is I normally like there's a point in the mix where I'm pretty happy with where most of the main levels are. And like there might be more mixing to do, and I might need to do some automation and stuff. But that's kind of the point where I start turning on the master stuff and getting it loud. Because if I'm mixing and mastering, like, even if I wait a day or two, like, I don't know that my perspective is going to be that much different. I may as well just get the whole thing over with and get it to sound like I want it to.
Good on you, man. Yeah.
So, like that, I just kind of turn it on and then tweak from there and just keep mixing, and then don't think about it. And then just every once in a while, like I'm kind of particular about like the level that everything's hitting plugins at, because it can really shape the sound. And I don't like plugins that are driven too hard. Like a lot of the time, well, okay, sometimes I do. I just like to know that I'm doing it. Before I started, when I was getting good at this stuff, like I would hit plugs so hard, and like when mixes got loud, it would just collapse and get small sounding and stuff. If you can gain stage everything right on your master bus, like you can really make plugins do beautiful things, especially if you're stacking them. Because the reality is that really what you're doing, if you're not doing a whole lot on any individual plug, is you're just stacking colors that you like. And so you're just kind of like building a palette of things that like work for you, and you're taking some stuff out and tweaking things when it's not working, and adding different stuff in when your taste changes and stuff like that. But yeah, like when I'm mixing and mastering, I don't really differentiate. Like at the end of the process looks really similar. Yeah.
Lots of little moves.
Yep. Lots and lots of little moves.
So basically the mixing is the master. It's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like my goal, even when I'm just doing a mix. Like,
right.
I really like, there has been one time where I've sent a mix to a mastering engineer and they were like, you don't like, just use that. Like I would just be making lateral moves. And that was like the best moment of my entire life. Cause I'd like heard of that happening, but I'd never actually had it happen. Like, like cause they would have just, turned it up or like maybe made a little EQ thing, but I really respect this guy a lot. And he told me like, this is good. Like,
yeah,
just use that.
Yeah.
And, but when I'm doing stuff that's going to be mastered, I actually try to incorporate a lot of the sort of saturation stuff. I just I do a lot of my level makeup in the last two plugins. And so
the inflator and the limiter.
Right. And so like, I'll get it to a point where it's not doing a lot of work. And then, we'll send it off and see what the mastering engineer decides to do. So it's always a scary thing to me. I've gotten back a few mixes that's like, that's brighter than I wanted to be. I know why you did that, but that's not what I wanted. So it's cool. It's part of the gig.
Yeah, totally. So this whole mixing process, is it taking place inside a template, or is it like pretty much different every single time?
Yeah. So I have a basic template that I use because I do a lot of like group processing and like bus processing and stuff. I just like cut out the middleman. Like, and like I have a master bus template that I use that basically everything, it's not doing anything when I turn it on. It's just kind of there. So I don't have to load plugs. And like I have a template that just has like too many effects on it and stuff that it's just so like I don't have to do all the labeling and all that stuff. But I pretty much start from close to zero every time that I open a mix, like at least on the channel level. So like I have a template that's all my auxes, and then I normally just import the audio and do all my grouping and stuff like that. That takes a minute, but honestly, it's kind of nice because I can get my head around what's going on while I'm doing that.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. I just did a mix because there was no time to get it done. I like literally just had to mix it inside the production, and it was just a muddy mix that like had to get mastered really bright afterwards because I just didn't have that perspective, that time to kind of like explore the track from scratch with the mixing session inside, like putting those tracks in the template and discovering it and realizing what's actually going on. Totally. I feel like that part of the mixing process is so important.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it takes me a little bit to like crack the code. Like when you get a track, you're like, what? There's this sound here, and it's a weird sound. I do not know what this is for. Like, what do I do with this? And, sometimes it takes a little bit of exploration, and just having to like relabel that and give it its own name, like kind of bakes it into your brain in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you do any practices to stay fresh and creative mixing? Like, obviously we have days where we come in and we're not as pumped as other days. Like, how do you stay, totally jazzed to do it?
Yeah. Okay. I have a thing where I can kind of like get in the zone pretty easily. And like audio is something that I really like a lot. And so normally what's hard for me is sitting down, but like when I'm actually in it, it's not so hard. Granted, like I struggle a lot with like losing perspective over the course of the day or like going too hard, but I'm absolutely one of those guys who loses track of time. Like I have no idea how long I spent like when I'm kind of in it mixing. And I not everybody like has that disposition, and I feel like I'm kind of able to it's just something that comes naturally to me. Like I'm pretty good at like the grind, but just sitting down and doing it is hard. A lot of the time what I'll do is if I'm having a really tough time, I'll turn off all of my notifications on everything, and then also make my room like I just moved into this new space, and like the walls are white, and like it's kind of monochrome, and I